The last thing my mother said before she slammed the front door in my face was, "You'll never step inside this house again." I stood there in the pouring rain, holding nothing but a duffel bag and a folder filled with receipts. Receipts proving I had spent almost every dollar I owned saving that house from foreclosure. 3 months later, that same house belonged to me, and the people who threw me out were standing on the front lawn begging for 5 more minutes. None of us saw that ending coming. Especially my sister, because the truth she discovered about our parents changed everything she thought she knew about our family. My name is Ethan, and for most of my life, I believed family was something you protected no matter what, even when it hurt, even when it wasn't fair. Looking back now, that belief almost ruined my life. I grew up in a small town outside Columbus, Ohio, in a house my grandfather built with his own hands in the late 1970s. It wasn't a mansion. The roof leaked whenever storms rolled through. The basement flooded every spring. The kitchen cabinets were older than I was, but to us, it was home. Dad always said the house carried our family's history. Every birthday, every Christmas, every milestone, everything happened there. When I was 12, Dad lost his job at a manufacturing plant after the company closed. He never really recovered from it. He bounced between temporary jobs for years. Eventually, he stopped looking altogether. Mom worked double shifts as a nurse, trying to keep us afloat. My younger sister Rachel was only 9 at the time. She barely understood why money suddenly disappeared. I did. By 16, I was mowing lawns, stocking grocery shelves, and fixing neighbors' fences after school. Not because anyone forced me, because I could see the bills piling up on the kitchen counter. Every month, there seemed to be another red envelope, another overdue notice, another argument behind closed doors. Whenever I handed my paycheck to Mom, she smiled and said, "We'll pay you back someday." I always laughed. I don't want it back. And I meant it. They were my family. Helping them never felt like a sacrifice. Years passed. I skipped college because someone needed to keep paying the bills. Dad's health slowly declined after a back injury. Mom became exhausted from constantly working overtime. Rachel graduated high school with dreams of moving to New York. I secretly paid her first semester's tuition. She cried when she found out. She hugged me and promised she'd repay every penny after graduation. I told her not to worry about it. Seeing her chase her dreams was enough. For a while, life seemed like it might finally be improving. Then everything collapsed. Mom sat me down one Sunday afternoon. She looked terrified. The mortgage was almost 6 months behind. The bank had started foreclosure proceedings. If nothing changed, we would lose the house within 60 days. Dad barely said a word. He just stared at the floor. I remember walking through every room that night. The living room where Grandpa taught me to play chess. The hallway where Rachel measured our heights on the wall every birthday. The back porch where Mom drank coffee every morning before work. I couldn't imagine strangers living there. The next morning, I emptied my savings account. Almost $80,000. Every dollar I'd saved over 12 years. Money that was supposed to become a down payment on my own house someday. Instead, it disappeared in one bank transfer. The foreclosure stopped. The mortgage became current again. Mom hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. Dad actually cried. Rachel called from New York, screaming into the phone, "You saved our home." For the first time in years, everything felt worth it. Or so I thought. About 6 months later, things began changing. Dad became strangely protective of financial paperwork. Whenever I asked about bills, he brushed me off. "I've got it handled." Mom stopped discussing money altogether. Even Rachel sounded different whenever she came home to visit. They whispered constantly. Conversations stopped whenever I entered the room. I convinced myself I was imagining things until one Saturday morning. I came home early from work because I wasn't feeling well. As I walked toward the kitchen, I heard my father's voice through the slightly open dining room door. If Ethan ever finds out, Mom interrupted. He won't. Rachel sounded nervous. We can't keep lying forever. Dad answered immediately. We don't have a choice. I stood frozen in the hallway. My name. They were talking about me. Then Dad said something that made my stomach drop. The house was never going to be his. I pushed the door open. The room went completely silent. Three faces stared back at me. No one spoke. Finally, I asked, "What isn't going to be mine?" Dad stood slowly. "You weren't supposed to hear that." I laughed nervously. "Okay, hear what?" Nobody answered. I looked at Mom, then Rachel. Neither of them could meet my eyes. I asked again, "What are you talking about?" Dad let out a long sigh. "We've decided to transfer the house." "Transfer it to who?" "Rachel." I honestly thought he was joking. "What?" "The house will be in your sister's name." I waited for someone to smile, someone to say it was a misunderstanding. Nobody did. I looked at Rachel. She looked like she wanted to disappear. "Dad," she whispered, but he cut her off. "It's already decided." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "I paid off the foreclosure." "I know. I've been paying this mortgage for years." "I know. I turned down college." "I know. So why would you give the house to someone who doesn't even live here?" Dad's expression became colder than I'd ever seen. "Because she's going to have children someday." I stared at him. "And a family home should stay with the family." "I am family." His answer came instantly. "No." The word hit me harder than a punch. I actually thought I'd misheard him. "What did you just say?" Dad folded his arms. "You're 30 now. You'll eventually get married. You'll leave. Rachel will carry this family forward." My mind refused to accept it. Everything I'd sacrificed, everything I'd given up, none of it mattered. Mom finally spoke. "We appreciate everything you've done." Appreciate? That word made me sick. Appreciate? I laughed. "You think this is about appreciation?" Rachel suddenly stood up. "This isn't right." Dad slammed his hand against the table. "It's done." "No," Rachel said firmly. "It isn't." The room fell silent again. Dad slowly turned toward her. "You knew?" I asked. Rachel looked at me with tears forming in her eyes. "I only found out yesterday." "You agreed to this?" She shook her head immediately. "I told them I didn't want the house." Dad interrupted. "It doesn't matter what you want." Rachel looked directly at me. "I swear I never asked for this." For 1 second, I believed her. Then Dad reached into a folder sitting on the dining room table. He pulled out several documents, signed documents. He slid them across the table toward me. I looked down. The transfer papers already had Rachel's signature on them. And that's when I realized someone in that room wasn't telling the truth. I picked up the papers with shaking hands. Rachel's signature was there, clear, neat, exactly the way she'd signed birthday cards and college forms for years. I looked at her. "You said you didn't agree." "I didn't." "Then explain this." She grabbed the papers from my hands. The color drained from her face. I've never seen these." Dad folded his arms. "Don't start." Rachel looked back and forth between us. "I signed paperwork yesterday, but it was for tax documents. Dad said they were needed because I was listed as an emergency contact." Dad didn't respond. For the first time in my life, I noticed something. He wouldn't look either of us in the eyes. Mom finally whispered, "Richard." He immediately snapped at her. "Enough." That one word told me everything. He was hiding something. I reached for the documents again. There were 6 pages. Most of the legal language was difficult to understand, but one sentence stood out. The current owner voluntarily transfers all interest. Current owner? I frowned. Wait. I looked at Dad. Current owner? The house has always been yours and Mom's. Nobody answered. I kept reading. Then I saw another name. Now my father's. Not my mother's. Mine for nearly 3 years. The legal owner of the house had been me. I felt like the room had started spinning. What is this? Mom covered her mouth. Rachel looked just as confused. Dad quietly sat down. Finally, he spoke. The bank wouldn't refinance the mortgage. What does that mean? They said my credit was too damaged. So, the only way to stop the foreclosure was to transfer ownership. To who? His silence answered the question. Me. The house had been legally transferred into my name before I paid the mortgage. Without anyone ever telling me, I stared at the papers. Every payment I'd made, every repair, every tax bill had technically been made on my own property. My voice barely came out. You put the house in my name and never told me? Dad nodded once. It was temporary. Temporary? As soon as things stabilized, we planned to change it back. I laughed. Not because anything was funny, because nothing made sense anymore. So let me understand this. You used my name. You let me believe I was saving your house. When legally, it was already mine. Nobody spoke. Rachel looked physically ill. Mom couldn't stop crying. I slowly placed the papers back on the table. I'm done. Dad stood. So that's it? That's it. You'd walk away from your family? I looked directly at him. You already walked away from me. I packed my clothes that evening, not because I wanted to leave, because I couldn't stay in a house where every conversation suddenly felt like a lie. Rachel followed me into my room. I'm so sorry. I believe you. You do? I believe you didn't know. She sat on the edge of my bed. I should have questioned the papers. You trusted Dad. So did you. Neither of us said anything for a while. Finally, she whispered, What are you going to do? I honestly don't know. She hugged me before leaving. It felt genuine. The kind of hug siblings give each other when they both know something has broken. The next morning, I loaded my duffel bag into my truck. Mom stood on the porch crying. Rachel refused to come outside. Dad watched from the doorway. No apology. No explanation. As I started the engine, he walked over to my window. If you challenge this legally, don't bother coming back. I rolled the window down. You forged legal documents. We corrected a mistake. No, you created one. He leaned closer. The house belongs to this family. I looked him straight in the eyes. It already does. Then I drove away. For the next 2 months, I rented a tiny apartment above an old hardware store. I tried to move on. I worked overtime, avoided phone calls, ignored messages from relatives asking why I'd left home. Apparently, my parents had already told everyone that I'd abandoned the family after demanding ownership of the house. I wasn't surprised. I was disappointed. Then one Tuesday morning, I received a certified letter from a law office. At first, I assumed it was another attempt to pressure me into staying quiet. Instead, it contained something I never expected. A notice informing me that a lawsuit had been filed against me. My own parents were suing me. They wanted a judge to declare that I had wrongfully claimed ownership of the house. I read the paperwork 3 times. The irony was almost unbelievable. They were asking a court to take away a house that the official county records already listed as mine. I hired an attorney that same afternoon. After reviewing every document, she looked at me and asked one simple question. Did you know you signed the original ownership transfer 3 years ago? What? She turned her monitor toward me. There it was. My signature, not forged, real. I remembered it instantly. The day I wired my savings to stop the foreclosure, Dad had rushed me through a stack of papers at the bank. He'd said they were loan authorization forms. I never read them. I trusted him. My attorney looked at me for a long moment. Then she smiled. This may be the biggest mistake your parents have ever made. I frowned. What do you mean? She tapped one page with her finger. They didn't trick you into taking responsibility for the house. They legally gifted it to you. She paused before adding the sentence that changed everything. And according to these records, they no longer have any legal ownership at all. For a moment, I couldn't process what she had just said. So I leaned forward. You're telling me the house is legally mine? She nodded. Completely. What about my parents? They've been living there as occupants, not owners. I stared at her in disbelief. They sued the legal owner? She couldn't help but smile. Yes. And in doing so, they handed us every document we needed. She spread the paperwork across her desk. Every mortgage payment, every tax receipt, every repair invoice, the new roof, the furnace replacement, the plumbing work, the basement waterproofing. Almost every major expense had come from my bank account. My attorney looked at me. You didn't just save this house, you increased its value. And you have the receipts to prove it. For the first time in months, I felt something besides anger. Hope. The hearing was scheduled 6 weeks later. Word spread through our small town faster than I expected. Neighbors whispered. Old family friends suddenly remembered they hadn't heard my side of the story. Some even reached out. One elderly neighbor, Mr. Collins, stopped me outside the grocery store. I watched you replace that roof by yourself. He shook his head. You deserved better. Others came forward too. A contractor who remembered I had paid him directly. A banker who processed the wire transfer that stopped the foreclosure. Even my old boss testified that I'd worked 70-hour weeks to save enough money. On Ebiwane, the truth started replacing the lies. Then came the day of the hearing. I hadn't seen my parents since I left. Dad looked older. His hair had turned almost completely gray. Mom avoided looking at me. Rachel wasn't there. I wondered why. The judge reviewed the documents for nearly an hour. Neither side spoke much. There wasn't much to argue. The paperwork was clear. Finally, the judge looked directly at my parents, Mr. and Mrs. Carter. He adjusted his glasses. Can either of you provide evidence that you currently own this property? Their attorney stood. He tried arguing that the transfer had been temporary. The judge interrupted him. Temporary agreements are written into contracts. He lifted the deed. This deed contains no such condition. Silence filled the courtroom. Then the judge turned toward me. Mr. Carter, the property is legally yours. The plaintiff's request is denied. My parents had lost completely. As everyone stood to leave, Dad walked toward me. For a second, I thought he might apologize. Instead, he whispered, You've destroyed this family. I looked at him quietly. No, you did that the day you lied to me. Then I walked away. I thought that was the end. It wasn't. About 3 weeks later, I received another phone call. This time, it was Rachel. She was crying so hard I could barely understand her. Ethan, I need to tell you something. What happened? I found Mom's journal. I didn't know what to say. She took a shaky breath. They lied to both of us. What do you mean? There was never any plan to give me the house. I frowned. Then why all this? Rachel's voice cracked because they needed someone to blame. She explained that after Dad secretly borrowed money against the house years earlier, he lost almost all of it in a series of failed business investments. He had hidden the debt from everyone. Abe and mom, when foreclosure became unavoidable, they realized the only way to save the property was to transfer ownership to someone with good credit. Me, after I paid everything off, they wanted the house back, not because of family tradition, because they believed they deserved it. Rachel found handwritten entries from my mother admitting she'd begged dad to tell me the truth. He refused. He kept insisting I'd understand someday. Instead, everything fell apart. A week later, Rachel asked if we could meet at the old house. I wasn't sure why, but I agreed. When I pulled into the driveway, she was sitting alone on the front porch, the same porch where we'd spent countless summer evenings as kids. She stood as I walked over. Without saying a word, she handed me a single house key. I don't want it, she said. It was never mine. I looked at the house. Every memory came rushing back. Birthday parties, Christmas mornings, Grandpa teaching me to ride a bike in the driveway. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Finally, Rachel smiled through her tears. You know what's funny? What? You saved this house twice. The first time, from the bank. She looked at me the second time, from becoming the reason we hated each other. I hugged her. For the first time since all of this started, it actually felt like I still had family. A month later, I made the hardest decision of my life. I didn't move back into the house. Instead, I restored it completely. Every room, every floor, every piece of damaged wood my grandfather had once built with his own hands. Then I sold it. Not for revenge, not for money, but because I finally understood something. A house can hold memories, but it can't hold a family together if trust is gone. The money from the sale allowed me to start my own construction company. Within 5 years, it became one of the fastest growing renovation businesses in the state. Ironically, the skills I'd learned repairing my childhood home became the foundation of my success. As for my parents, mom eventually apologized. She admitted she had chosen silence when she should have chosen honesty. We speak occasionally now. Dad never apologized. Not once. Years later, I heard someone ask him why he lost the family home. According to the neighbor who overheard the conversation, he stared at the ground for a long time before quietly saying, I confused ownership with love. Rachel and I still laugh about that sometimes. Not because it's funny, because it's the only truthful thing he ever admitted. And whenever people ask me what it felt like to lose my home, I tell them I didn't. I lost the people I thought would always stand beside me. The home was just a building. The real foundation of a family has never been bricks or wood. It's trust. And once that's gone, no house in the world is strong enough to keep everything from falling apart.